Great story, horrible animation. I know the animation in this movie is not
I
good,
absolutely
but it's
love
lots of
animation,
while the
but
other
actually-
so Hoodwinked, an agreed-upon hilarious film with unique spin on the fairy tale structure, with the only downside being the low-quality animation. The film starts at the scene of the crime, where Little Red Riding Hood characters are gathered at what the audience thinks is the end of the classic fable. Detective Nicky Flippers comes on the case and hears the same story told 4 times from 4 different perspectives. But it turns out that none of the stories tell the whole objective truth, and the characters must work together to stop the real villain. Okay, great concept, but why does it look like that? The film by brothers Cory and Todd Edwards was fully funded from the pockets of prolific inventor and founder of Sky Vodka. Despite being a successful inventor, he couldn't provide infinite funding and kept the budget at $8 million. The film was animated by a team in the Philippines that was largely new to the CGI game, without the technology of major studios. Edwards intentionally leaned into the stop-motion nostalgic style, which allowed them to bypass photorealistic details. In this video, instead of saying the film is good in spite of the animation, I will argue that because the movement in Hoodwinked lacks smooth continuity and realism, the viewer becomes aware that the animation is visibly constructed, which supports the film's main concern with the instability of memory in narrative events. This awareness encourages the audience to question the reliability of what they see, rather than passively accept the story as objective truth. The first piece of evidence I want to talk about is how the intro to each narrative starts with a storybook flipping open. This is a form of metification, which Greenhill and Kohm describe as discussing the form of fairy tales within the retelling of the fairy tale. Some of the animated details look papery, like the trees, flat grass, or running water. Contrast this to how the running water looks in Jibaro, for example. Hoodwinked's movement looks flat and papery. I'd like to bring up Walden's point on memory and animation here. The creativity and incompleteness of memory is often highlighted in animated works, particularly when their frame-by-frame production is emphasized, such as with stop-motion and pixelation. The papery and stop-motion feel serves to both represent the incompleteness of memory and represent the form of fairy tales themselves, that have a tradition of getting passed down by memory, changing and becoming different across different cultures. The medium is the message, similar, for example, to how the art style in The Secret of Kells carries a tradition of Celtic art. The paper and puppet feel carries a tradition of fairy tales, and the untrustable animation communicates how crime retellings often have inaccuracies, and not everything can be trusted. One specific example of the motion in Hoodwinked breaking the illusion of life is when Wolf is running through the forest after Red. This breaks the principles of squash and stretch and arcs outlined in Disney's illusion of life. His body stays in the same shape like a puppet, and his jumping over the log doesn't seem like the right arc for how we perceive gravity in real life. Compare this to Judy Hopps, who looks unnaturally squashed and stretched in still frames, but whose motion is unquestionably natural running and jumping when all the frames come together. We don't believe the wolf's movement, but we're not supposed to. The wolf's running is different from different perspectives. In one version, he is a frightening, growly beast trying to eat Red, and in another, he is a reporter trying to ask Red a few questions, but accidentally scared her away when his tail got caught. When the audience is aware of the construction, it's a warning to watch closely, think, and question the truth of what is being shown. Rickards also describes another point of how a sense of the uncanny creates uncertainty, and is particularly useful for showing the interior of the mind, like how the images we are seeing are memories. Another example is how when Red rides in a minecart, gets shot in the sky, and sees her grandmother in the clouds, her form breaks principles of follow-through and overlapping action. Her hair doesn't move at all, and her cape barely flows behind or upwards, as it should when she's free-flying. A great comparison is Aladdin's magic carpet ride. Their hair and cape is in constant motion, especially note how it looks when they're in freefall. But the point of Aladdin is to be lost in the magic, and it has a normal linear narrative structure. The hoodwink scene, in contrast, is meant to provoke questions about what you're seeing. Why is the track broken? Why is Grandma in the sky? Is Red a reliable narrator if she is seeing visions? Rickard states how the uncanny entails doubts whether an apparently animate being is really alive, exactly how we should doubt whether Granny is really there or not. The break of the illusion of life is what gets us to ask these questions instead of just being lost in the realism and passively accepting what we are seeing. The animation works for the Rashômon effect style narrative, which describes a situation in film and in real life justice system where truth is contextual, contingent, and personal to the teller. Memory can be altered or an incomplete picture while still being the complete truth to the storyteller. The janky animation is the visual manifestation of these partial views. Memory is incomplete, inaccurate, messy, and subjective, and animation is the unique armory for representing this because it can externalize complex psychological states. This isn't a classic fairy tale narrative. It is told 4 times, with different versions of the truth, going against the traditional Disney Pixar style. It is only right that the visuals rebel as well. They act as a way to get audiences to be aware that what they are seeing is constructed, so they question the way narration unfolds, unlike normal fairy tale films. Overall, instead of subtracting from the movie's writing, the animation supports the narrative structure, and the message of memory and perspective is never the whole truth would not be the same without this distrust of what you are seeing being reality.
Remember, Ted, pieces of a puzzle make funny shapes, but they still fit together in the end.